made that my topic too for this day. So just to begin to set the mood, we can chant wherever you are together. Just chant, Jagannatha Swami, Nayana Pathagami Bhavatume. At least we chant that 3 times, okay? And Prabhupada's pranams. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vaskatya Desatarane Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jagannatha Swami Nayana Pathagami Bhavatume Jagannatha Swami Nayana Pathagami Bhavatume Jagannatha Swami Nayana Pathagami Bhavatume. O Lord Jagannath, O Lord of the universe, kindly be visible unto me. O Lord Jagannath, O Lord of the universe, kindly be visible unto us. So before the year of 1967, in ISKCON, there were no deities until the Gaur Purnima, which was in March of 1967. And on that occasion, Jagannath Swami, Subhadra Baladev, and Lady Subhadra were installed in our small storefront San Francisco temple. And it was a very simple installation. There was no great fanfare. This was such an early part of the movement. We weren't, at that point in time, having knowledge of all the different rituals and the facilities that would be needed and the different items that would be used. For example, at that early stage, we didn't even know what a ghee-wick was, or to speak of a ghee-wick lamp. So when Lord Jagannath was installed, it was with incense. There was candles as per Prabhupada's instructions, and lots of chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And later he explained that factually the installation is done through the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But everybody took part, everybody who was there in the room, and it was quite crowded. There was no social distancing. We were literally body to body because this was quite a big event, not only for us, although there was very few of us, but for the whole area, which was quite largely hippie populated at the time. And we explained that actually God would be coming to our little temple and that we would be welcoming him. And so there was quite a bit of interest to see what God looked like and how we would welcome him. So you probably know the backstory, how he was located in a import store, how Srila Prabhupada asked Sham Sundar to carve large size, because they were quite small, the ones that I found, they were small. And so then the history continued. The installation, Prabhupada had requested a high platform. He didn't use the word altar, just like at that point, we didn't use the word Vyasa sign. We had a platform, which we called the dais. Prabhupada would sit and lecture from there. It was raised, raised. But we didn't have the technical terms. We didn't know Vyasa sign. We didn't know Guru Puja. We didn't know Giwiks, so many things. So the Maha Mantra was predominantly used for every occasion, and particularly on this one. And there was a lot of incense because we gave everybody incense. So the whole entire audience was waving incense. And then a large tray with many, many candles was passed around, and everybody would make some circles. Prabhupada said wave, use the word wave, wave some circles. So everybody in the audience participated in that way, but mainly through the chanting. And one thing that stands out, a few things, but one thing that really stood out for me and captured my heart at that point was during that kirtan, I noticed my god sister Janaki was literally, tears were pouring down her cheeks. I kind of was like indicating what's wrong, is everything all right? And she could just say, he's here, he's here, he's really here. And I think indeed everybody in that attendance was feeling his presence, and he was really here. And he was always there for us. We would literally go out in the streets and tell people, do you want to see God? Do you want to see God? You come. And we'd take him to the temple. And there would be the beautiful smiling face of Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev. On the initiation, actually, he was just wearing his painted clothes. There was not even a sewn outfit. For the first Rath Yatra, there was neither a sewn outfit. The first outfit was the next year in 68, when Srila Prabhupada told us at that Rath Yatra we should sew him a dress, and he made a sketch indicating what it might look like. And so Jamuna and Harsharani took up that challenge. So in this first Rath Yatra, there were not even hand-pulled carts because we only had 2 weeks' notice. So we borrowed a truck with a flatbed behind it. It means like imagine a pickup without sides, and it was a little bit longer. A pickup truck without sides, just a flatbed in the back. So on that, Sriman Sham Sundar Prabhu made like a little canopy, and under that canopy, Subhadra, Baladev, and Lord Jagannath were placed, but they weren't placed in a straight line. So Baladev was on one side, Subhadra Devi was looking out the back, and on the other side was Lord Jagannath. Prabhupada had told us that we should have a lot of flowers, and we had, at that point, never even gone to the flower market, and we didn't go this time either. We went to the Golden Gate Park and helped ourselves to all the flowers we could possibly find and decorated our cart profusely with all these flowers. And I remember that there were 2 mounted police, means they were on horses, and they were our attendants to go down to the ocean. The cart was going to be going from the beginning of the park all the way to the end and then to the ocean. And at one point, as we passed through the park on the street, one of the policemen was looking around the park. He go, "Where are all the flowers?" And the other policeman looked at our cart and he pointed. He pointed, but somehow they were very kind and didn't get on our case. We were told there should be prasadam. Of course, every event is not complete without prasadam, and we should feed, quote unquote, everyone. And that was my department. And I'm thinking, well, how is that going to be possible? We didn't have any giant, huge pots, and nor did we have any budget. So I decided chapatis. Chapatis are flour and water. And there was a couple that used to donate bags of flour. They really liked it that we would have free meals. So when I mentioned to them that this is my plan for this program, they gave sufficient flour. And my goal, which seems pretty small nowadays when you think of the size of the Rath Yatra festivals, but my goal was 1,000 chapatis, to which we began the day before. And after I got all the dough made, I started calling people from the street, from the temple, anywhere to help roll them. And at that point, I realized that I only had 2 of the rolling pins. So then I told these hippie people, just go out on the street and find empty wine bottles, which was not difficult because the hippies would, among other things, drink this wine and they would leave the bottles. So they went out, they got the bottles and we washed them, dried them, and we put the water in to weight them down, put the lid back on, and began rolling the chapatis. And because none of these people had really cooked before or had even experienced chapatis, and I mean, even devotees don't always successfully roll around chapati. So these chapatis were many different shapes, and some of them had holes in them, but it didn't matter. We just kept cooking. And we didn't use butter or ghee. So by the next day, and of course we were cooking all night, they were maybe a little dried out, you could say. In retrospect, I would say they were kind of a little bit like matzahs, if you know a matzah cracker. So the thing was, by this point, all the devotees, myself, we were totally sold out to Krishna Prasadam. And we could understand the benefits of Krishna Prasad. We could understand the glory of Krishna Prasad. So even though these chapatis were, they weren't too delectable to look at, and maybe the taste wasn't really as magnificent as you might want, we were convinced of the power of prasad. And so we were handing these chapatis to people. Take it. This is spiritual food. It will spiritualize you. You can take this spiritual food and you'll please God. This food has been tasted by God. And we were just so intense in passing it out and convincing people to take this and honor this prasadam that it was amazing that people actually accepted it and ate those kind of hard, tasteless chapatis. And I see sometimes nowadays we're passing out the prasad. There's a great big feast, mounds of whatever you make. And sometimes you'll see entire plates are discarded, left on the side or thrown in the trash. But the really amazing thing was that during this first little attempt to glorify Lord Jagannath and to serve Jagannath Prasad on a wide scale, nobody threw them away, because we were saying these are spiritual. This isn't ordinary food. Nobody threw it away, and they just crunched through them and ate and accepted those kind of strange chapatis. And actually, indeed, Mahaprasad from Lord Jagannath is so wonderful that, as Prabhupada said, we don't eat prasad, we honor prasad. That's, one thing. And there's so many wonderful stories about the power of prasadam. But the main thing is when Krishna says, you offer me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, water, with love and devotion, I will accept it. And although we could not claim to be pure-hearted lovers of Lord Krishna or Lord Jagannath at that time, with all of the love we could muster up, we were offering these dried chapatis. And I actually feel that to this day, because that was over 50 years ago, but I actually feel Lord Jagannath, noting our sincerity and enthusiasm in our attempts to love him, show him love, he accepted them. And therefore it became prasad and they became prasad. So we have to remember that prasad means the mercy of the Lord. And if it's already been enjoyed by the Lord, it means it has been enjoyed, because the Lord is the enjoyer, the supreme enjoyer. We are not. So the Rath Yatra festival, worshiping Lord Jagannath in the West, first Rath Yatra festival, as I said, was in 79. So it's been now 53 years of Jagannath Rath Yatra. And it started in San Francisco. And the second year was still in San Francisco. But the second year, we actually had a hand-pulled cart by the hard work and efforts of Shamsundar Prabhu and assisted by His Grace Jayananda. And I think most of you know, at least have heard of Jayananda, and most likely you have his picture on your Rath Yatra carts. At least that was Prabhupada instructions to us, that and put his picture on the cart. And one day a year that we should set aside a day to honor him as we do other departed Vaishnava acharyas. And his love for Rath Yatra was so infectious that he could practically get a stone to stand up and dance and assist in Rath Yatra. He just touched people's hearts by his genuine sincerity, and he was, what you say, a friend to all. And people picked up on that. So because of him, many obstacles in performing Rath Yatras were overturned, especially when it came to getting permits and permissions, etc. Jayananda's beautiful smile and sincere, open, hearted affection charmed people. They just melted. He melted their hearts. Yeah. So I just got a message. My internet connection is unstable. I hope it's still working on your end. So regarding Lord Jagannath, Prabhupada explained that Lord Jagannath is one feature of Krishna. And that Jagat means the Lord, and Nath means the universe. So Jagannath, Lord of the universe. And one devotee had written a letter in 68. And the question was, what is the difference between Jagannath and Krishna? And Prabhupada replied that Krishna means himself and all of his different expansions. So sometimes Krishna appears as Vasudeva, sometimes he appears as Shankarshan, and sometimes as Jagannath, and sometimes as Lord Chaitanya, and sometimes as Rama. So then he further explained, so Jagannath is another feature of Krishna, and he's especially favorable to the people who are not strictly advanced in the Brahminical culture of Vedic rituals. And he went on to tell us that even in Odisha, in Puri is in Odisha, Orissa, sometimes known as Odisha. So in Odisha, Jagannath Puri is there, and he explained probably about 90% of the people there are fish eaters. But Lord Jagannath still accepts their service. So then he was explaining that in Kali Yuga, people are not so clean. And therefore, due to his mercy, the service to Jagannath Swami is preferred. And he explained that service to Lakshmi Narayan and Radha Krishna requires highly elevated position. But still, whether we serve Jagannath or Radha and Krishna, the effect is the same. But facilitating the worship of the Lord in the form of Jagannath, he explained, is more congenial. Congenial means, well, you can translate as going on, more congenial than others. And then he said, when anything is offered to Jagannath, it does not mean that it is not taken by Krishna. In the temple, although we offer to Jagannath, it is also accepted by Krishna. And he emphasized this by saying, rest assured of that whatever we offer to Jagannath, Jagannath is Krishna, so Krishna is accepting, rest assured. And he told a friend who was in publishing, he told that person that back in India, he'd written to him and said, my Guru Maharaj, meaning Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, recommended temples of Jagannath in these countries, meaning the Western world. So I was inspired to establish, first of all, Jagannath Swami, because he's kind, even to the Malachas, which is us. So there has been various instructions at various times, and one rule of thumb is if there are various instructions that may vary, they're more or less the same, but not exactly, or sometimes they're completely reversed. That instruction written on the latest or spoken on the latest date. So that instruction is the prominent, that's the one to follow. So I'll give an example that in 1967, he said to us to continue a sense of devotion. It's better to wash the body of Lord Jagannath with hot water so that we may have the feeling that he is comfortable. That was in 67. However, in 72, there was a change. So far your question is concerned, should Jagannath deity be bathed in water? That is not necessary. They should be washed once a year. That is sufficient. 15 days before Rath Yatra. And that is called Snayatra. And then he explained, otherwise, if you bathe them, that will damage the wood. And we had this experience of daily bathing. Water would somehow get in. There's always like little cracks in wood. That's normal. Get in, and it would cause some problems. Even in one situation, some insects entered into the wood, into the cracks. So Prabhupada minimized the risk. Just once a year, bathe during Snayatra. Otherwise, during you use the mind, mana seva, bathed with mantra, and a soft cloth can be slightly damp, but not, dripping wet. So on 4th January of 1973, there was one rather well-known letter with instructions, quite a few instructions regarding deities, and also including Lord Jagannath. So this time, 73, so we go from 72 to 73, and it was just the last one about not necessary once a year Snayatra, that was November 72. So now just a couple of months later, even a little less, January 73, he gives a stronger instruction. Under no circumstances shall we bathe the Jagannath deities with water or any other liquid. they should be based by mantra. So that is the predominating instruction. And in another letter, in that same letter, this pujari, this particular pujari, was kind of known for asking a lot of questions, and he would write, a lot of questions to Srila Prabhupada. And so in this letter, Prabhupada gave the answers, but he also gave another interesting instruction. So he said, now you're asking if Lord Jagannath carries a flute. Why are you asking these things? Who's giving you such freedom? Pujaris should operate entirely under the supervision of the temple president and the GBC, not independently. And then he gave a very strong statement. He said, the greatest danger to our movement will come when we manufacture and create our own process for worshiping the deities. In other words, we bypass the Acharya, we neglect Prabhupada's instruction, and we use our own minds to create a new process. So then he told that person, don't ask any more new questions. Whatever is going on, follow it just to the exact standard that I have given you. That's all. So that was pretty clear. And then there was another letter that in 75, so that's a couple years later, that was also January. And apparently somebody else had written a question about Jagannath, and here's the answer. You should not give them, Jagannath, any clubs to hold. It is not necessary. So another clear. So these are just, like a few things that in terms of the worship, but there was some more with regards to the dressing. And these are very nice, sublime instructions in terms of the mood of dressing and including colors, etc. So one devotee, Kartikeya, he had asked about what is our mood? And Prabhupada responded to both him and Sudama. Sudama later on became sannyasi and opened up Tokyo. So he answered that regarding the question of worship, Kartikeya's question of worshiping Lord Jagannath, he should always be worshipped with awe and reverence. So awe and reverence, in other words, little formality is there. We're not, little telling jokes and nudging him on, formality, like a king. And another statement, which wasn't written, but he says, as a king, royalty. So awe and reverence. But then he was telling nice things. He wrote to Pendra that I'm very much obliged that all of you are taking such care of Jagannath so nicely. And then he told Pendra, who was the receiver of the letter, the more you make the deity of Jagannath attractively dressed, the more you shall become spiritually attractive. So, and then he gave several points. Jamuna Devi, I think most of you are aware of Jamuna Devi, the disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So he wrote to her, yes, this was in 1968 also, and also in June. And he goes, yes, please decorate Jagannath with very attractive, nice clothing and ornaments, a helmet. A helmet means like a crown, as brightly and magnificently as possible. And the way to dress Jagannath has already been shown to Harshara, has been shown. So as I mentioned, he had drawn a little sketch how the dress may look. And then he wrote, there should be sufficient flower garlands for them daily also. And then he mentioned that the decoration should be so attractive that when people see Jagannath, they will forget all the attractiveness, or the so-called attractiveness of Maya. He said, then it will be successful. And he says, actually, this is the process of decorating Jagannath. Our eyes are attracted due to habit by the beauty of Maya. But if our eyes are attracted by the beauty of Krishna and Jagannath, then there's no more chance of being attracted by Maya. And then he pointed out, in other words, by seeing Jagannath nicely decorated, we become free from the clutches of Maya. And then he was giving several points. This was the topic of several discussions and several letters, and not always specific to Jagannath, but specific to the worship of the deities, of which, of course, Jagannath was there. But it became apparent to Srila Prabhupada that we weren't always able to maintain the proper standards that he had given us. And so he started addressing this issue of installing new deities when the existing deities were not being properly cared for. And so he had wrote that unless we have sufficient experienced devotees, we shall not install Radha Krishna or Jagannath deities. And he said, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very kind and lenient. Simply chanting Hare Krishna will please him. But he suggested that when you can have a temple, it doesn't mean you have to have deities. And when there's a want of pujaris, then he wrote, only Panchatattva pictures that can be worshipped by the performance of kirtan. And he said that as soon as Jagannath or Radha Krishna deities are installed, you immediately require pujaris, qualified pujaris. And if there's a scarcity of such pujaris, then these centers should be satisfied by only worshiping the Panchatattva of Lord Chaitanya in a picture form by performance of Sankirtan. And then that was a letter, that was in 70, and in 71 to another devotee, he cautioned against installing Jagannath deities at a new center that had not been proven. Where proven means had not been open for some length of time to prove that it was capable of remaining steady and keeping the program going on. And what had happened at that time for him to say this was that there had been a temple in Hamburg, Germany, where they had deities, and the temple was not able to maintain, so it was closed and the deities were taken away. And Prabhupada was really somewhat, distressed by this, that now you have invited Krishna and now you say you must go away. So this is not a very good thing. So he said the deity installation means regular worship for good without fail. And he mentioned that just like the temple at Jagannath Puri, that temple was established over 1,000 years ago, and it's still going on. And they always have prasadam ready, at least for 1,000 people. And Bhoga is offered 56 times a day. So, and then there were questions regarding home worship. Now, rule of thumb is in the deity in the temple, that's his home. When we go to the temple, we're the guest. the guest and the servants of the deity. But if we have deities at home, they still have to be taken care of with perhaps not perhaps, but a more simple standard. But in the home worship, Krishna is the guest. Nonetheless, we should treat our guest with great respect and try to please him. So one devotee had written that they wanted to worship Lord Jagannath. And they said that they were going to try to make that worship first class. What was Prabhupada's response to that? He said, so far as your deity worship of Lord Jagannath, don't bother with it for the time being. That is my opinion. Householders can have small altars in Guru Gauranga and Jagannath may be worshipped, but you should not spend a lot of time to make the worship first class. As you say, you cannot make it first class. That requires time and money and men. So then he gave a clear instruction. So better to leave the worshiping of deities nicely in the temple, and you may go there and worship. Keep a small Guru Gauranga offering, offer incense with flowers in the morning, and offer all your home prepared foodstuffs there. That's enough for the time being. And then he gave another instruction. Better to spend time chanting and following the other regulative principles and preaching and selling my books. So in other words, the temple was intended to be the place of worship, and he did not want the deities in the temple to be neglected or their service reduced because people were busy at home trying to do their own service to their own personal deities. Krishna's Krishna, but sometimes he has more potent, powerful forms. For example, the first deities installed in ISKCON were Jagannath Swami Baladev, and those deities are still existing and still being worshipped. Very powerful deity. Later on, many forms of Krishna, and just like there's that story of the candle, you light one candle and all the rest of the candles are taking their flame from that candle, but still there's an original candle which holds some distinction. Or you can say, like, Radha Govinda in Jaipur, very powerful deities, We also have Radha Govinda in New York, very powerful deity, installed by Srila Prabhupada in Jaipur, actually during a Panda program. But in our homes, because you cannot have the full extent of worship, and if you do, that means you won't be going to the temple, and Prabhupada didn't want that. So the deities are there as our guests, and we should serve them nicely, but not try to imitate the temple worship. And for those who live too far for a temple, yes, there are deities in your home, but still keep a simple program. Then Prabhupada addressed the topic of children, worship by children. And he said that he was writing to one devotee, and she had posed a question. And he said, no, I don't think you should give Jagannath to small children. They will not take proper care, and they will make offenses. Because, kids, the hands in the mouth, the deity can go in the mouth, the hands in the ears, the eyes, the nose, and then they touch the deity, and they may not be, properly trained in terms of other types of suchi, suchi-muchi kids. So he said, in this country, meaning the West, the parents are generally not giving a proper example of deity worship with respect. Now, at that point in time, this was March 69, there was very few children. We were children, we were Prabhupada's young children, but then we were not brought up in a way that we were taught the proper standards of cleanliness, etc. So he was mentioning that just like in my childhood, I was seeing my father bow down and offer respects to the deity, and I did the same on seeing him. So now we have devotees who are, 50 years plus or 40 years plus in the movement. They have children, their children have children, and have grown up watching and observing their parents and being shown how to behave. So, but here Prabhupada said that, so I followed my father, but it's not done here, so it's better to take care in giving out Jagannath. And then he was more in that was letter to Satyabhama. And then in 71, he says, the deity worship can be learned at not less than 10 years old by children. So then that was quite specific, at 10 years old, and they can, but then he said before that they can assist. And he explained how they can assist. They can assist by learning how to bow down. So bowing down is also in the realm of deity worship. They can dance and chant. When we dance and chant in front of the deities, who's it for? I mean, some days the way they're dancing, I'm not sure who it's for, but normally how we were taught by Prabhupada was very graceful and energetic sometimes, but very graceful. And eyes glued on the deities, we were dancing for Krishna. So dance and chant is also deity service. And then making garlands, that's also deity service. And cleaning the arti utensils, cleaning Krishna's temple. So in this way, they can be engaged. These are also different parts of deity worship. So those are, some specific instructions. And sometimes it has happened that a deity, whether it's Jagannath or other deities, they may be broken or they're in some form of disrepair. So that topic was addressed by Prabhupada. And he said it's not advisable to repair and use the rejected deities of Boston. Better to make a new set and install them. So that was one set of instructions. Deity is broken, better to make a new set if it's Jagannath, or you can replace otherwise. And then it became more specific that so far your Jagannath deities that they've become badly cracked, and that was the issue with the wood becoming crashed, it's better to replace them. But if that's not possible, then you can repair them. And then he gave an instruction, if the deities cannot be worshipped, then they may, using his own words, thrown into the sea, put into the ocean. Just like Adi Jagannath, the first deity of Jagannath, he came from a log that came in from the ocean. And if for some reason the deity is damaged to such an extent it cannot be factually repaired properly, then Prabhupada put it in the ocean. And if you're not near an ocean, the next preferable thing would be a deep body of moving water, such as a river, and if that's not available, a deep lake. So Prabhupada's love of Rath Yatra was very profound and very deep, and it began in his own explanation as a child, 5 years old. He was telling how at the age of 5, he wanted to conduct a Rath Yatra, and he induced his father kind of forcefully to find a Rath Yatra car, a small one, for the purpose of him to hold a Rath Yatra in the neighborhood, and he did that. Prabhupada makes comments, and this was from London. In London, we were there. We went there to establish a temple, and it wasn't happening as quickly as we thought. In America, we would just like go to a new city and just it seemed almost overnight we'd find a small storefront and immediately we'd have a little temple there. And we didn't think it would be too much different in London, but it was not the same at all. And we got there in September, and even by May of 69, September 68 or May of 69, we still didn't have a temple. And at the same time, Shamsundar, knowing that when there would be a temple, there would be Jagannath, had begun to carve Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev. And then they were carved, they were finished, but we didn't have a temple. And then we thought about having a Rath Yatra. And Prabhupada was greatly pleased by this proposal to have Rath Yatra, even though we didn't have a temple. And he wrote that some way or other, if you can introduce this Rath Yatra festival in London, by all means, the London Center will be successful. In other words, we didn't have it yet, but if we get the Rath Yatra, it will be successful. And it doesn't matter if you can or cannot establish a temple there, but if you can introduce the Rath Yatra festival, surely it will be a great success. So try to execute this as far as possible. So that gave us a lot of hope, and something to shoot for, something to aim for. We had the Dedes carved. Now we were going to debut them, not by an installation in the temple, but on the streets of London. And permits were taken care of, I think by Mukunda. Maybe Gurudas also helped. And Shamsundar set about building a great big hand-pulled Rath Yatra cart. The place we were staying, I say we, referring to myself and Shamsundar, at that point in time, the devotees, the six of us who came, and then my child, the baby little thing, we were living in different parts. We were scattered. We didn't even live all together. We just lived where we could find a place we could afford. And it was generally in some kind of less cultured area. So the place we were in had a big space in the back, and Shamsundar used that space to begin building the cart. And, you know, building a big Rath Yatra cart is not a one-man show. So when anybody would kind of show any interest, and where would people find us? Well, they'd find us on the street doing regular Harinam, or they would find us at a program. We had a regular program at a place called the Arts Lab, and it was a place where people, artists of all kinds, music and other forms of art, were given opportunity for free expression. John and Yoko came there and actually checked us out at one point. We didn't realize it at the time. And so we let them and, you know, here and there, a couple brave souls showed up, and these persons who showed up to help Shamsundar, not knowing anything about Jagannath, not knowing anything about Rath Yatra, barely knowing anything about Krishna consciousness, but they liked the chanting, they liked the prasad that they had experienced, and we needed some help, and they were willing to do that. And for some people, this was their ticket. Not that you need a ticket to become a devotee, but this was their entry-level ticket to their life in devotional service, that they helped build the Rath Yatra cart. So now the big day was there, and we had a magnificent route planned, and we had the permits and the permissions and et cetera, and we're at Marble Arch. If you know anything about London, this is a monumental, a very significant place. The cart is there, the signal is given to pull, you know, the conch is blown. We start to pull this big, huge cart with the big, huge wooden wheels. And we got about, not very far. The wheel on the side of Baladev cracked and crumbled. And this was such a big, heavy cart. You know, you could think, well, maybe some people could get there and hold it up, but it was really not possible. So there was just, you know, like when a sudden, we say in America, a curveball. I don't know if, I think it's an expression with baseball. The person throws a ball, and if they're an expert pitcher, the ball will go straight and then make a turn, and the guy who's trying to hit the ball won't be able to hit it because it curves out of his reach. So that expression is used sometimes when something really unexpected happens, like we got a curveball thrown at us and we didn't have a plan B. We didn't have a backup plan. We didn't expect this. But devotees are never at a loss for solutions. So the deities were handed down and carried by hand, all three of them, and the procession, a little less glorious without the cart carried on. And in the meantime, poor Sham Sundar and one or two others were left to get that cart out of the way because it was causing a massive traffic snarl, because it was on a main thoroughfare. Had we kept moving, no problem, but not only were we not moving, it was in the middle of the road. So you can imagine how broken-hearted Shamsundar was. And he wrote something about that to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had a whole different vision than we did. And he was like, don't worry, the people saw Jagannath. Don't worry, it was a success. Jagannath came out, the people saw him, they heard the mantra, that prasadam. So in spite of that, that little, for us it was a big upset, but in spite of that, Prabhupada was pleased that the show carried on. And he gave instructions on different aspects. And one aspect, like this was in San Francisco, so 68, I mentioned first pulled car, but there was only one cart. And in London the first time, only one cart, and probably it was that day that way in other places. And Prabhupada said, if it's difficult for many reasons, then you can accommodate all three deities on one cart. So it was not out of the question. And he wrote in 73 to Bhaktadas, who lives now in Bangkok, an American devotee, who's expatriated over there. He goes, I want to see my disciples all over the world introduce two items. And those two items were opening Radha Krishna temples and Rath Yatra festivals all over the world. And my understanding that I think Russia is at the top of the list for the number of Rath Yatra festivals that are performed. Now there's over 450 festivals all over the world. Some of them, greatly expansive, and some of them a little smaller. But size is not the objective here. It's just getting the opportunity to see the smiling face of Jagannath, to see his cart, to touch the rope and pull the cart. And of course, glorify him through the holy name of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So he was giving a letter to Madhavisa, who was temple president in San Francisco at the time. And of course, the temple president is always in a tough place because everybody has so many ideas, and they definitely like to offer them, even dump them on the temple president and say, here, you should do this, you should do that. And now Prabhupada's, and money is always an issue, isn't it? Finances are always an issue. So the temple president is always trying to be very careful about how the money is spent. And so now Prabhupada said to this temple president, among other things, simply, he says, so far as making additions for this year's Rath Yatra, you may make 3 Raths. So this was 1970. And so that means in that year, 1970 was the first time in our ISKCON history that there were 3 Rath Yatra carts, and this began in San Francisco. And then he said the rest of the details are already there. Simply, you may supply more money. So he's telling the temple to spend more money. Simply, you may supply more money for festoons, decorations, flowers, bells, and flags. And then he gave a beautiful glimpse into the actual status. I know there's very many esoteric explanations for Rath Yatra. Prabhupada didn't go into all of them. We just knew that, trying to drag Jagannath back to Vrindavan, the gopis were. But Prabhupada didn't put so much emphasis, but he did tell us the spiritual sky is far away, but you just try to make this festival like Jagannath Puri, Rath Yatra. Jagannath Puri, or wherever Rath Yatra is performed, is non-different from the spiritual sky. So wherever we perform Rath Yatra, spiritual sky is descending, and that place becomes a sacred space and place. Then, as already mentioned, Prabhupada said the Rath Yatra festival is very dear to me from my very childhood days. And then he's told this devotee, so I very much appreciate you holding Rath Yatra in Chicago. Then there was a concern, and this was like during the last year of his presence. It was in 77. And by now, there are Rath Yatras sprouting up in many places. Originally, it was mainly in San Francisco, and people would come from all over the West Coast and other places to join the San Francisco Rath Yatra. But now, other Rath Yatras, and Prabhupada is expressing a concern, and that concern was that there was worried, one devotee in charge, he was worried that due to the Rath Yatra that was going to be held in LA for the first year, it would impact the Rath Yatra in San Francisco. And he was very concerned that one shouldn't impact the other, but specifically he was worried about the San Francisco Jagannath Festival being impacted. And he said, this must not happen. Due to competition, one program should not diminish the other. And then he mentioned San Francisco Jagannath Festival has been established for many years, and it must be maintained and increased in the same grand style. And as far as possible, all the devotees should attend it, as has been done in previous years. Then he said, you may also hold Rath Yatra as described in Los Angeles, and in this way, both festivals can be performed very grandly. So how did he describe to the devotees in LA to hold a Rath Yatra, aside from a different date? He goes, why not hold a Rath Yatra in LA, on Janmashtami? In other words, he didn't want that competition. Competition was okay, but one shouldn't be at the diminishment of the other. So he said, why not hold Janmashtami on Rath Yatra on Janmashtami? He goes, it's about at the same time you're planning, and it will be very much appreciated. And then he was explaining for Gaur Nitai, Rath Yatra alone, if it's just Gaur Nitai, Rath Yatra isn't recommended because they're coming in the role of devotees. Gaur Nitai are the devotees. And because they're playing the part of the devotees, then you would hold a Rath Yatra, which is for Lord of the Universe, in other words, Krishna. So then he said, but as you're having 3 large cars, you can arrange the following. And his solution was, Gaur Nitai will be on the first cart, Radha and Krishna on the second cart, and Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev on the third cart. And he felt that would be, very attractive and would be a good solution to the possible impingement on San Francisco's Rath Yatra. And he made a comment about about Rath Yatra, and he goes, he described it as chanting and taking prasadam. That's all. Organize this all over the world, and they will be saved. And then he gave the instruction. So this is a standing instruction worldwide that, if possible, Jayananda's picture should be hung on the Rath of Lord Jagannath. And in all of our temples, a day may be set aside for holding a festival in his honor, just as we do in the disappearance day of other great acharyas, Vaishnavas. And I'm going to go back to that in a moment. Just I'll finish up here. I don't know, maybe I should be finished now. It's 9:30. Is that? Actually, it's 9:37.
1 second. Yuga-dharma
Yes,
will tell me.
maybe some questions. I can ask people about questions.
I'll just make one closing statement.
Я хочу еще одну вещь, как бы завершить логично то, что я говорила.
So he was giving hints on decorating the Rath cart, and he goes, "You've inquired." This is to Jamuna. "You've inquired about decorating the cart. The crimson color with silver decorations is quite all right. There's no strict regulation about decorating the cart. We can decorate the cart very fascinatingly with gold and silver and other shiny metallic embroidery work as far as possible. The idea is that the more we decorate Lord Krishna, who is non-different from his cart also, the more we become decorated indirectly." So observing the cart, assisting in any way with decorating the cart, just touching the rope, pulling the rope, seeing the cart, all of this is auspicious activity that can assist us greatly on our path back home, back to God. Hare Krishna. So you mentioned questions?
1 second, I will listen to Yuga-dharma.
Харе Кришна. Мы сейчас попросим задавать вопросы в комментариях. Нас сейчас смотрят на канале YouTube, нас смотрят на страничке социальной сети ВКонтакте, и я попросил задавать вопросы. Пока вопросы печатают, потому что есть небольшая задержка, я задам несколько своих вопросов. Переведите?
Мне перевести на английский?
Да.
Или, может быть, вы ей будете говорить по-английски, а я буду говорить по-русски?
Мой английский оставляет желать лучшего, поэтому я боюсь.
Хорошо. Просто отзвук. Вы понимаете, да, как только я на микрофон будет отзвук.
Ага, да, я понял. Ну, давайте я попробую тогда на английском. Okay, now there is streaming in YouTube and
мы стримим на YouTube.
And social net VK. I don't know how to translate. In connection, yes, in connection. And I'm asking to write down the questions to you. And because of few задержка, как сказать, few minutes. Yes, okay, behind. So I can ask a few questions. Okay. So I have a chance to ask you about this decision in this year. Отменить. Cancel the Jagannath Yatra in Jagannath Puri. What do you think? Is it the wish of Jagannath, Lord Jagannath? Sorry for my English.
Srila Prabhupada always advises us to be cooperative. Local national laws, international laws. And we do know that in other years, back in, I think it was 1918, where there was another was another pandemic going on.
И еще была одна эпидемия.
Lost their life, including Jagannath.
Много людей умерло. И в особенности в Джаганнат-Пури тоже.
So I think Lord Jagannath would rather see the smiling as opposed to dead bodies of his devotees.
Предпочитает видеть улыбающиеся лица своих преданных вместо мертвых трупов на улицах.
And there is a very real risk of having so many people in.
И риск действительно реален, если столько людей соберутся вместе.
So there's other ways that this can be addressed.
Другие пути, как это можно сделать.
And
две ратха-ятры, например, провести.
Way to do the same there, but I know it's a decision for them to make, especially since their head person in India, he's somewhat of
люди в Индии.
So I don't think
Юга-дхарма Прабху. Мне очень сложно переводить, потому что я себя слышу, и когда я говорю, я ее не слышу.
Ага, я понял. Sorry, okay. I can translate my questions for Russian, okay, because of sound is quite bad when yeah. Okay. Understand. So okay, this but Pandas, Jagannath Pandas
in Jagannath-Puri.
Pujaris, they're asking
Давайте я буду говорить и по-английски с небольшим отзвуком, но зато, по крайней мере, будет слышно и быстро.
Окей. Да, мне на русском тогда, да?
Да.
Хорошо.
Okay.
Панды или
So the Pandavas, the Pujaris of Jagannath Temple,
они просят
they
правительство
are asking the government to allow a local Ratha-yatra.
Потому что если в соответствии с правилами, если они не проведут
They say that there is a rule, if they don't have a Ratha-yatra, then for 12 years they have to stop the Ratha-yatra.
But they can have,
Но
answer that question. But
как ответить на этот вопрос?
Having the Ratha-yatra that would not risk and still have the Ratha-yatra.
Которые не ставят столько людей в рискованное положение. И все же провести Радха-ятру.
First of all, with all due respects to the Pandits,
во-первых, со всем уважением к пандам,
they're very fixed on their particular little chapter.
Вы знаете, у них не очень широкое видение, они очень зафиксированы в своих старинных путях.
And I say this with confidence because otherwise,
говорю это с уверенностью.
Western devotees who are,
как западные преданные,
in some cases, longer than many of these pandits have been born on the planet, and yet we're not allowed.
Мы практикуем сознание Кришны дольше, чем некоторые из этих панд вообще существуют на этой земле.
So how can we actually trust what they say to be accurate?
Как нам доверять тому, что они говорят?
The universe is the Lord of the universe.
Когда Господь всей вселенной
which it is, but
сделал это. Юга-дхарма Прабху, все еще, когда я говорю, что-то вы включили на вопросах, почему-то.
I'm not hearing.
Thank you very much.
I'm here to translate the questions. 1 second. We're here.
Next question.
Следующий вопрос.
Sometimes we can buy the doll of Jagannath.
Итак, иногда мы можем купить игрушку Джаганнатхи.
Я по-русски лучше тогда говорю, да? А вы переводите.
Как вам удобнее, просто больше отзвука нет, все хорошо.
Ага. Нет, хорошо. Давайте лучше вы тогда переводите.
Хорошо.
Иногда мы можем купить игрушку Джаганатхи.
We buy a Krishna doll or Jagannath doll.
Но, как вы сказали, что Шрила Прабхупада не очень поощрял, чтобы...
When you said that Srila Prabhupada did not approve that the children play with that kind of deity.
О божестве именно.
Or we're talking exactly about the deities. Do we equal the
божество
doll
и игрушку.
to the deity.
И если Шрила Прабхупада не очень это поощрял, зачем тогда мы производим эти игрушки?
And if Srila Prabhupada never encouraged us to do this, why then we make the Krishna dolls or Jagannath dolls?
Yeah, because a lot of times I'll see those dolls on the floor, the kids chewing on them, you know. That's exactly what Prabhupada was saying, that, you know, the children shouldn't prematurely be given access to the deity. Krishna is non-different from his name and his form, and surely these little dolls are a form. And bad habits sometimes become, you know, we just start, oh, it's been done, and then we start forgetting that maybe, you know, we should revisit this. But, you know, what to do about, you know, there's this whole sentimentality that people, you know, want to give their kids Krishna, and the kid puts Krishna in his mouth. I mean, is that a very good thing? Nonetheless, you know, because there's children and there's some innocence, I don't think they're going to be racking up offenses, whereas if we did it, of course, indirectly we've done it by giving the dolls to the kids, but I know my daughter was given a small, really small, like this kind of small, silver Krishna with a cow. If you've been to India, you'll see these little things in the jewelry shop, Krishna with a cow. And she was not more than 4.5 at that time, because this was in India. And at 4.5, she returned back to America to go to school. So it means this was like before that time. And Prabhupada noticed that, you know, she had this little thing in her hand. And we were at someone's home. I think that person was the one who gave this little deity. And at one point she put it down. You know, kids, they don't stay too focused. So she was moving around. Prabhupada picked it up and he was holding like this in his hand. Then he goes, Saraswati, where's Krishna? And she looks, and she sees he's gone. And then but where's Krishna? And she's looking here, there. Where's Krishna? And then suddenly she just turned around and she put her finger and she goes to Prabhupada, you have Krishna. Now, whether she was speaking, you know, esoterically, you know, or she knew he had them, doesn't matter. You have Krishna. But he didn't give it back, and she didn't protest. And he explained, you know, that this was Krishna, not a toy. And also because it was silver, it was valuable. And, you know, children don't understand the value of things, and therefore will treat things sometimes without consideration for the value. So the little deity wasn't given back, and she didn't seem to mind it. So by using that as an example, one can maybe understand the answer to that question. I will also mention in the very, very beginning, we found, you know, everybody was going out and getting these little wooden juggernauts at the import store. And some devotees were putting a screw in the head and wearing the deity around their neck. Now, maybe if they tied the string around the waist, it might not have been so bad, but they put a screw in his head, you know, because at that point we knew the Krishna is non-different from the deity. Krishna, you know, like Krishna's dancing our tongue, but, you know, most of us haven't really had a continuing direct experience like that. Sometimes Krishna shows us and we get it for that moment, but when you're actually fully realized and fully capably Krishna conscious, that moment is your reality, and it doesn't stop. There's no cessation. So we didn't even drop in our minds that putting a screw, I mean, how would we like a screw to go in our head? He writes a letter that we want him to be comfortable, you know, and we're not thinking, of course, that letter came much later, but a screw in the head, you know, how would that make you feel? So, and of course, Prabhupada stopped that practice also. The other thing regarding deity worship in general, why he didn't want people just getting deity. Sometimes people will get a form of Krishna that's intended to be as a deity, but they just put it on their shelf. I've seen in one place it was on a piano, and they're not being worshipped, they're just there. Well, there's a stone or wooden or brass figure that Krishna comes when he's called for with love by the devotee in order to worship him. So when the form of Krishna is just standing like a decoration, an object of decoration, it's not so nice. And Prabhupada definitely did not want that to happen, because then our regard for the, in a subtle way, the regard for the deity makes the deity less important. You know, here's on my shelf, here's there, whatever. And oh, there he's on the altar, but not, you know, on the altar there's worship, but on the shelf he's collecting dust, you know.
Да, спасибо большое. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
И, пока нет вопросов, я
We
имею
don't have
шанс,
any more
наверное,
questions,
Господь
so
Джаганнат дает мне возможность
I'm so
задать
happy
свои
that
вопросы
Jagannath
вам.
has, Lord Jagannath gave me this opportunity to ask you my personal question that I wanted to ask.
Я не буду этим злоупотреблять, но еще один вопрос я
I'm not
хотел бы
going to
задать.
take advantage of this opportunity to see you, but I have another question.
Когда вы говорили про вкручивание вот в голову Джаганнатха,
When you spoke about screwing the screws into the Jagannath's
я
head,
вспомнил историю, когда
I
в
remember the
2003 году
story.
я
In
приходил в храм
2003, I went to the temple on
и я повторял
Begovaya in
джапу,
Moscow, and I
и
was
там
chanting japa.
буддийские божества, Джаганнат, Господа Джаганатхи, которым сейчас поклоняются ежедневно.
And Jagannath was
Это были
there.
те же божества.
It's the same deities that were there.
И повторяя джапу, я вдруг увидел, как корона Субадры, она начинает съезжать ей на лицо.
Subhadra was falling into her face.
Я испугался, что происходит.
I got scared what's happening. I thought, okay, maybe I'm hallucinating.
Я подошел ближе и увидел, что
And
она
I
прям
came close, and I saw that her crown dropped to her eyes.
Пуджари поправил эту корону.
And Pujari set it back.
И я увидел, что эта корона прилеплена просто на вот Bluetooth.
That crown has a blue tack on her forehead. That Subhadra has a blue tack on her forehead, and it's stuck to it.
Я сел повторять джапу, и я увидел, как корона опять стала съезжать.
Hare Krishna japa, and the crown started to fall down again.
И мне показалось, что Субхадра, не понравилось, что ей вот клеют чем-то на лоб.
And I felt that maybe Subhadra Maharani didn't like that there was a blue tack stuck on her forehead.
И я вот до сих пор не знаю, насколько это
допустимо. So I still don't understand. Is that
какие-то вещи, вот, которые позволяют держаться
to use some,
возможно. Или
some help of glue or some kind to hold things in place.
Make a comment. So when Srila Prabhupada was first here in America, he had his small Radha Krishna deities, Radha Govinda, brass. And one day he was dressing them, and he turned to one young disciple, and he told, it was a girl, he goes, "Can you bring me a stick?" So she brought a stick, and a small stick, and he put it under her skirt, so the skirt would flare out. You know, like the skirt was straight, so he put the stick and it held the skirt out. Now, if you just, I've asked people, what would you think about putting a stick under Radharani's skirt? Oh, you know, like, then I told, well, Prabhupada did that. And because he did that, I've sometimes done that too, where like, you know, just flip the skirt out. What was common in that time, in that era, was beeswax. That's what they used, and then in India. But then some other kind of a mixture was coming. It was usually reddish, and that was also used to keep crowns or earrings or rings, you know, on the deity. And that's acceptable. So some of this is, you know, so hence blue tack is acceptable. Now, I know there's very different qualities, and some blue tack is so sticky that you actually can't remove it from the deity. So then you have a buildup of blue tack, and that's not a very good thing. So if you're going to use blue tack, no problem, but make sure it's removed, all of it, when the deities are undressed. I've seen people bathing deities, and there's a big wad of blue tack, and wait a minute, wait a minute, have to take it off. But you can use to keep the crown on, or the rings, the earrings. Sometimes you have to put the blue tack where Krishna's flute is, because otherwise the flute drops. That's a little different than a screw in the head.
Конечно, отличается сильно от того, чтобы вкрутить ему в голову какой-то металлический гвоздик.
Thank you very much. There is a question.
Thank you. So there is a question that came in.
Надежда спрашивает, фигурка Кришны стоит со сломанной рукой. Рука потеряна. Это оскорбление. Что делать с этой фигуркой?
Is the arm of the what she called the statue of Krishna is broken. So what do I do with the statue?
It's a Krishna statue or a
Krishna statue. Krishna statue, and the arm is broken off and lost.
Well, then I already answered that. You put it in the ocean. If no ocean, in a river with moving water. If no river with moving water, then you put it in a lake, a deepish lake or pond. This is Prabhupada's direct instruction. And just for your information, there was a discussion in one of my temples about replacing the deities of Radha and Krishna because on one occasion they had been very greatly damaged, and there was an attack, an outside attack. It wasn't by the devotees. And many devotees feel that, they're put together again, but there's a broken here, broken there, it's put together. And in the books on deity worship, it's explained that we actually shouldn't worship a broken deity, But Prabhupada has given us a lenience of repairing. I noted a couple of those there. He said, best is, but if you cannot, if it's too difficult, then you can repair. So that's the consideration. If an arm is lost, there should not even be a question. You should understand this, put in some body of water, If you're in Moscow, I see there's a pretty good river there,
Thank you so much for this answer. Please tell me that.
And I know I wanted to mention something else, is that, so when we were having this discussion about replacing these, there were Radha Krishna deities or not, I got a hold of the main person from Radha Raman Temple, because Prabhupada had recommended that we could take information from them. And I wanted to know from them what was their standard, what would their opinion be? And he answered me right away, very congenially, citing points where the deity should be replaced and adding what Prabhupada said, put in a body of water, preferably the ocean, but if not the ocean, etc., etc. Ultimately, the devotees were so attached to these deities that they didn't want to replace, although I had found one sculptor, Murtiwala, who could exactly replicate, because nowadays they have precision instruments that they can make exact replicas. It's quite amazing how they can do this. But at that moment, the devotees weren't ready to do that. Because of their attachment. But for me, understanding Prabhupada's instructions, particularly on damaged deities, including with what the Goswamiji had explained to me, I felt the proper thing would be at this point to make that transition. But sometimes the devotees have deep feelings of sentiment and attachment, and it's not that Krishna is going to ignore them. So you know. We have to use a little sensitivity and a little intelligence at the same time. I'm not hearing anything.
Yes, I'm here, Malati. You're, hurrying up again. So please slow a little bit when you answer.
Sorry.
Да, хорошо. Да, да. Next question. Sometimes it happens that the deities are repainted and they change their looks to the point where you cannot recognize them. Should we keep in line with the previous looks?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Абсолютно.
This changing of the deity's appearance, changing the size and the shape and the color of the eyes, and with all due respect, you Russians are champions of changing the appearance of the deities. And it's just something that Srila Prabhupada spoke very clearly and strongly about. The first occasion to have to consider this point occurred in London. And although he asked us not to speak about this, I'm speaking about it because, anyway, people know the deity was attacked and Radharani suffered some damage. Interestingly enough, we got those deities, Radha-Landanishwara, because they were a little broken, Radharani. So the Hindus, with their Hindu consciousness as opposed to their Krishna consciousness, rejected the deity. And Prabhupada happily took these deities and installed them. And when they were attacked in our temple, so we had to, find someone who could repair. The only person we could find who we felt we could trust with this was a marble sculptor. He was from Scotland. He was a meat eater, he drank and he smoked. Of course, he didn't do those things in the temple. Prabhupada just didn't even care about that. If he could just fix the deity, that was what the concern was. What did he care about? The repainting, that they should not look different. And he advised us we should keep a book of the deities with their picture and then comments on the different occasions, like on the day the deity's installed and different other situations throughout the year that the deity is worshipped. And for the devotees who closely worship the deities, many of them have many wonderful incidents because Krishna is there. That is Krishna. The deity is Krishna, and naturally Krishna reciprocates with his devotees, whether they're the pujaris or other servants. But upon this occasion, he was so careful to make sure there would be no change in the appearance. And in the last few years, I'm sorry to say that their appearance have changed greatly. And people say, oh, that's so nice. But what is so nice about just somebody can paint? Okay, you're a nice painter. But if you were a servant of Krishna painter, then you would see, here's how Krishna looked. And you will just follow that instead of your own little mind spinning out and making lies bigger or smaller or a whole different color, changing the mouth, etc. In one place, very famous place in ISKCON, they actually took some kind of special putty that they use on cars to break, they have it smashed, and so to fix the smash, they use this putty, and they put it on the eyelids of the deity to change the shape of the eye. And if you look at the original pictures and the current pictures, you can see it really clearly. So the appearance of the deity is not arbitrary. The deity is not like artists, they'll paint on canvas, they may paint on a wall, they may paint on so many things. The deity's painting is totally different. And we're there as servants to the deity, and we should not presume to take the liberty to change one thing. You know. Now, when a deity is first painted, especially if they are repainted, and they have not been repainted for quite some time, it will be a little more like, the appearance will sometimes be like a little bit more apparent. Just like I just had operation on this eye and then on this eye, right? And not at the same time, one after the other on different days, but they cover your eye after the operation for at least 24 hours. And when you take off that covering, the whole world looks like a whole different world because your eye has been repaired. So when you paint and there's new, fresh paint, it's going to look different in just terms of the freshness, the sharpness of the paint, but the features should not be changed. You know, the newness of the paint will but the features should remain as they were. And for this, you need to take photographs from different angles and close up and keep those photographs so that from one person to the other, there's a consistency. And 50 years from now, you will still know, oh, here's so-and-so. I mean, we have deities in Vrindavan that are hundreds of years old. And sometimes, and you know, oh, here's Damodar. Or if you go to Jaipur, there is Govinda, there's Gopinath. You know, they don't change their looks, and it's been hundreds of years. So somehow the artist-minded persons within ISKCON are seeing the deities as an opportunity to display their great talent and creativity, but that is not the way and place to do so. Just be a humble service, and your greatness and your creativity will be perfectly expressed when you perfectly just keep the deity in the same way as the deity was. Even though they may have to be repainted, they shouldn't be changed. Another thing was just odd random thing is like in the corner of the eyes, inside, on the outside and on the inner side by the nose, should be some reddish, Prabhupada for that. And the deity's hands should be reddish, not pinkish. Pinkish is very in vogue nowadays, but reddish. And on the one occasion when we did that repainting of Radharani in England, that was the only correction. He goes, more red. More red. He said it twice on the hand. You know.
Okay, thank you. Please clarify that in case Radha Londaneshwari, that it was a broken, it's just a finger, small finger that was broken. So it's acceptable to worship the deity with this small repair?
It was a little more than a little finger. Therefore, Prabhupada said, love to discuss this, although I was discussing it with you to show the importance of not changing the features. You know. Nowadays, that breakage occurred during shipment. Nowadays, they've got this really good material, and it would be almost, nothing's impossible, but almost impossible to break a deity in transit, because they fill in with this foam and it totally surrounds the body of the deity, and there's no chance of shifting or breakage, you know. So that's a good use of some of our modernness, you know. Okay, so
we still have questions. Do you have time? Anna is asking, Srila Prabhupada, did he have his personal deities when he came to USA and that he worshipped them?
Yes, they were worshipped in New York. And then sometimes, for example, when he went to Moscow, when he went to Russia, he had his little deities, and he didn't bring them, and he asked me to worship them in his absence. and which, you know, it's going to be a short absence. My husband had gone with him, so he took my husband and gave me his deities to serve. And I asked what was their schedule. And he said, that you can determine, but then once you determine, you maintain, don't change. Again, personal deities, there's some latitude, but once you make a determination, then don't change it.
And one more question. Can the uninitiated devotees make garlands for the deities?
Yes. Yes. But they should be, you know, told beforehand about the standard of cleanliness that's required, you know, not put the thread in the mouth like how people are used to doing, etc. And, you know, they should be clean. I mean, when they get garlands in India, quite often the garlands are made by Muslims. Not in every place, but quite a number of places, right? That Krishna's accepting that. So what to speak of someone who's wants to be a devotee, as long as they follow, you know, they're clean, you know. Entry-level service, you know.
Okay, next question. What was the name of the deities that Srila Prabhupada brought with him?
Radha Govinda.
Radha Govinda. One more question. Can we decorate the altar and everything around it with a theme of winter, such as snowflakes and things like that?
There is some, there's always going to be controversy, right? But there is evidence because he said, how do we worship Radha Krishna and Jagannath for that matter? We worship Radha and Krishna and Jagannath in the mood of Aishwarya. That means formal, kingly. And he said, actually, our worship of Radha and Krishna is to Lakshmi Narayan, but Krishna will accept. So we're not, you know, some people get in this little Gopi Bhava mood and they make the, you know, with the deity drive, but this is not Prabhupada's instruction or program. And especially if people are less than fully purified, which that means all of us and the people who come, we don't want to become casually familiar with the deity, where we actually, in a subtle way, we're equating the deity with our own selves and our own mind and our own preferences. So this little bit of formality is really important. You know, this. So as such, he did not like these backdrops depicting different sceneries. At the same time, I mean, this is just my personal take and observation. On occasion, you know, just like he said, don't put clubs on the deity or plows on Balaram, you know, like, but maybe on a festival day when Balaram was dragging the Yamuna, maybe you can hand him on that day the plow, you know, certain days. And I remember, I don't know if it was a fake picture or not, but there was a picture of a Rath Yatra in the snow, and I was told it was Russia. Do you know about that? So there was everybody there with the deities of Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, and they were kind of on some type of sled or sleigh, something in the snow. And, you know, I thought that was kind of interesting. But we should really try to consider Prabhupada's instructions, because as a pure devotee, he knows for sure what is to be done and what is not to be done much better than any of us. And let's just say some of us are hugely advanced. Still, the majority of people are not. So if we do something at an advanced level that most people cannot relate to, and then they imitate, then that's not a very good thing. You know, casual behavior around the deities, for example. You know. Definitely no fake flowers. Definitely not fake flowers. That's in writing to Himavati. No.
Very interesting about the fake flowers. That those flowers that decorate the altar, or those flowers that we use inside the altar?
Well, it's going to be dependent on how you read the letter, but he was indicating both. But he indicated if you can't get flowers, then you can use leaves. Well, in most countries where there's a strong winter, for example, if we don't have flowers because of winter, and even our trees don't have leaves in the winter, you know. But I've seen devotees become really clever using different, you know, decorating the altar in different ways that looked very attractive, but weren't fake flowers, and neither were they real flowers because they couldn't afford them, you know, but they found different ways of decorating the altar. Yeah. But I was just going to mention, I just find it really amusing nowadays because, you know, in India, flowers are there, set, you know, like 24 hours a day, you can find flowers, you know. And some of the temples now have been, I don't know, influenced or what, but they will use, I haven't seen it on garlands yet, but in their in decorating, they have used the Indian version of fake flowers, you know. But the real question in mind, okay, this looks good to me, but how does it look to Krishna? Is he accepting this? Is this what Krishna wants? And, you know, that takes a little, as Prabhupada would say, a little intelligence, and therefore we have to go by the words of the Acharya, you know.
We don't want to exploit your time, but last question, please.
Okay.
About worshipping the deities of Srila Prabhupada. Anna is asking, where are the deities of that Srila Prabhupada brought? Where are they now?
His original deities?
Yes.
I can't tell you exactly for sure. Then it may be Calcutta, small ones. Just like the original Jagannath deities. At one point when I was in India, so I had this baby, I had these deities, we were in India and things were just really difficult. And I gave them to somebody who was going to America. And they got to America, and for some time they were in New Vrindavan. And they had been given to the son of Surab. Surab is the devotee who designed the temples in Vrindavan and in Bombay. And his son was being sent to the Gurukul. Maybe he was about 10 or so. That letter from Prabhupada not giving young children deities hadn't come out yet. And he was a little bit of an older boy. So anyway, I thought this boy is leaving. He's not going to see his father or his mother. And he had some affection for the Jagannath deity. So I gave him, I wasn't thinking, about the future. I was just thinking of the moment. I just can't take care of them. And so I gave them to this boy. His name was Hari Kirtan. And then while he was in New Vrindavan, the letter came from Srila Prabhupada about not having the children with their own deities. So he took all the deities. That wasn't wrong. He took them. But I don't think he had any idea that among those deities was the original Jagannath deities that were found in San Francisco. And from that point, we don't know what happened to them. And that leader is no longer alive. So, but it just shows that we really need to be careful with deities. It's like, it's Krishna. And even if we don't get it, Prabhupada said, this is Krishna, so that at least we can act like we get it and behave properly.
Devotees are so grateful for your explanation. They send their obeisances, they send the hearts and everything.
I obey back to all of you. I want to thank you for asking these questions, because it's something that's a little bit near to my heart, because I did have the experience from Prabhupada directly in many cases, but very closely direct, you know, maybe one person in between. And we shared, because we weren't so huge and so many devotees at that time, we shared everything, you know, so, and now there's, and people come and they take, as in Prabhupada's words, liberty, they take liberty with the deities. But for me, one of the beautiful things about worshiping the deity is doing something for Krishna, who's eternal, and that has been done, you can say, from time immemorial. It's like when I go to Jaipur and I see Radha Govinda, and there they are. And when I come back again, 1, 2, 3 years later, there they are. They have not changed. It's the same beautiful faces and features, no change. And the worship, the puja is going on for centuries, you know, and that sense of continuity, that, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And we're just always so like willy-nilly changing, but this continuity is a very beautiful thing. Now I'll tell you one other, you know, so probably 500 years ago, they didn't have watches, right? Use the sun. So my first time in Jaipur, January 72, with Srila Prabhupada, I saw that Govindaji was wearing a watch, wristwatch. I was so fascinated with that. And I asked Prabhupada, 2 things came out of that visit. I mean, more than 2 things. One of the things, Tamal Krishna became a sannyasi, Gargamuni became a sannyasi, and Radha Govinda, who are now in New York, they were installed there. But anyways, so I asked, well, can we also offer a watch? And Prabhupada, you know, he just was, it was all right, you know. So I couldn't wait. I was going back to London, and specifically to the manor. So I got Gokulananda a watch and surprised the devotees, like, where did that come from? I said, oh, because he doesn't want to be late for his meetings with Radharani, you know. But Prabhupada, you know, he gave the okay. So the other thing, when we were there, we noticed that after the whole arti was over, people would come up and they'd have these little cotton swabs on a stick with some scented oil. And the pujaris would offer it underneath the nose. He didn't put it on them, under the nose. The deity would smell that, and then he would pass it back. It would be prasadam. And people would come and put, you know, take the all around, you know, come out, you just put your hand out and they will like share that prasad. So that was another thing I asked, can we do that? And he did, he agreed to that. So many temples, after the arti is finished, some scent is offered on a cotton swab to the deities. Now, it has become a Now we know Kali Yuga flowers aren't always wonderfully scented, but so devotees are thinking they're compensating by putting the flower oil on the flowers, but that is not acceptable. You can offer the oil on a little cotton, on a stick with some cotton after the whole arti ceremony is concluded.
Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. So much. I hope we can see you soon in our stream again, because I think this is recording. Я думаю, что эта запись, она,
This recording,
да, она
will be
будет
posted.
посмотрена многими.
And we're sure that we'll get a lot of followers to see you.
У преданных возникнет еще больше вопросов и
Devotees will
желаний.
have a lot of questions and desire.
Возможно, сейчас смотрели не все желающие, поскольку
of course,
дачный
right
сезон.
now, maybe we couldn't see that everyone who wanted to see
Многие
couldn't
просматривают
see
еще
you.
эти эфиры
But
позже.
usually our recordings are watched quite widely.
И мы будем с нетерпением ждать
So we're
нового
looking
эфира.
forward so much to a new meeting with you.
Well, and again, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this knowledge and these instructions from Srila Prabhupada.
Чтобы передать вам это знание и эти наставления Шрилы Прабхупады.
It's very important.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. We will let you go. Hare Krishna. Hare